Hey little axolotls, welcome to another video, or if you are new here, welcome to the tank. My name is Ezra and this is a space where I share my healing journey as someone with a complex dissociative disorder, along with living at the intersections of gender, race, sexuality, disability, lots of things. And this is a bit different to the usual videos that I make because a lot of the time I mostly just give a recap on life and talk about my mental health. However, I wanted to do a video today sharing my experience and sharing with you my wheelchair that I recently received. For those of you who maybe have been watching this channel for a while, you might remember that late last year I briefly mentioned that I was going through the process of applying to have my NDIS plan reviewed, to have a wheelchair incorporated into my funding. Unfortunately, because when I initially applied for NDIS and what I was approved under was a psychosocial disability, even though I gave them evidence from an occupational therapist, along with supporting evidence from my GP, my specialist that I see for my POTS, so postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, along with a letter from my psychotherapist, which that one wasn't required, but I gave it as supporting evidence as well. I was declined funding for a wheelchair, which is somewhat understandable because, I mean, I'm upset about it, but their reasoning was that, I haven't tried all avenues of managing my fibromyalgia and my POTS, which is why they wouldn't fund it. But I also am a little bit annoyed because they gave me, I feel like, I always feel like when I go to say this, I sound so ungrateful, but they gave me extra funding, which costs more than the amount of the chair that I had a quote for. That I didn't need extra funding. Like the reason why, and there's different funding categories, right? So I applied to have a specific category that I didn't have in order to get the wheelchair. But they gave me funding in one of the categories that I already had that I didn't need extra funding for. So I'm just like, Anyway, so I was declined for that. I then went and went through the application process with Enable New South Wales. Obviously, I had to get another report from my occupational therapist in regards to that. Now, they did they approved, but also it was a conditional thing. So they gave me what options, even though I had multiple wheelchair trials and my OT had sent over the recommended chair for me, they were like, no, and they were making suggestions towards a foldable wheelchair, which I did already have one of those. I had a lot of issues with that simply because, not with all of them, but with some of them, you can't remove the armrests, which was a problem with mine because it did not cause fibro flare-ups, but obviously it didn't necessarily help because when I was going around, I would essentially have to chicken wing to use the wheels because of the armrest being there. Also, because foldable wheelchairs, obviously they have the extra, like the cross brace in order for it to fold. They're typically heavier than rigid frame manual wheelchairs. And I wanted something that would allow me more capacity to do things, so I ended up getting a loan and putting money on my credit card and privately purchasing a chair. And like I said earlier, the reason why I did this is because of my fibro and my POTS. So with my postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, otherwise known as POTS, I get presyncope, so I struggle with, if I've been like standing up for too long, for example, or if I have been walking around for too long, I start to feel faint, I start to feel lightheaded, I get tunnel vision, and it's a shitty experience. I thought, again, with many things in my life, I thought it was normal. I don't know whether it was exacerbated due to stress or due to weather, but that's when I ended up going to see my GP, and she gave me a referral to a specialist who I think is a cardiologist. But then I had like the tilt table tests and stuff like that done, and they were like, yep, it's POTS. And I'm like, cool, great. How do we deal with that? So I have been on It's like a medication that helps to lower your heart rate. That being said, I am still getting episodes of pre-syncope. I do need to see my specialist again, but the last time that I had an appointment with him, it was on the phone, and he was saying, when I explained those symptoms again, he was like, yep, the last time I saw you, I was thinking of starting you on this other medication as well, but you'd need to come in and we'd need to do some more tests just to make sure that that would be the right fit for you. And it's also like $120 a month. And I'm like, girly pop. I don't know about that. Especially now that I'm living by myself and I use 2/3 of the money that I get through my pension on rent. So I will get around to seeing him for that, but having a chair helps me immensely to be able to go out and do things, because for the longest time, and that was also why I was umming and ahhing as to whether I really needed a chair, because I thought, well, do I really need to go out of the house? Do I need to do that? I could just stay inside, or I could just not go out of the house for long periods. And that's, yeah, I don't know. It's shit, I guess, when I think about it, because yeah, I was just like, yeah, no, it's fine. I can just settle to not go out, not do things. But yeah, I've had the chair for maybe a month or two now. I received it, I think it was maybe like a week or two before I moved to where I'm living at the moment. So I've used it a small handful of times. I've also used the manual to electric attachment once, I think, when I did a Bunnings trip, and it was so helpful. Being able to stay out the full amount of time, not be able to worry about, syncope, pre-syncope, or not having to be so concentrated on, oh, well, if I stay out for this period of time, or if I'm doing, all of these things, how is that going to affect me later when it comes to my fibro? Am I going to have to spend, the next couple of days basically in bed or doing very little activity because I'll have, pain, like I'll have pain or I'll have brain fog. And yeah, being able to accommodate myself when I need to. Obviously, if I'm doing like short grocery shopping, I don't typically take my chair with me if I'm just ducking in and out of somewhere. But if I know I'm going to be out for a prolonged period of time, I will take my chair. If I know that it is going to be rather than a medium length of time, which is when I take my chair, if it's going to be a long length of time, I would typically take my electric attachment for it, or if I know I'm going to be somewhere where I'm going to have to go a long distance, then I would also bring it for that. But I wanted to share a bit about that, and here is the content about my chair. So this is my new wheelchair. It is scripted, so it's based off of my measurements, so there weren't a lot of modifications that needed to be made when it comes to that. Hi Nimbus. Patrice is kind of just chilling behind me, but this is an Apex A rigid frame wheelchair. So in terms of specifications, it's like 4.8 kilos without like the wheels, armrest cushion, anti-tippers. So the lightest configuration when it's together is 8.2 kilos. So it is very lightweight, which is absolutely beautiful. It is obviously quite different from my folding wheelchair that I had before, but I do find it a lot easier to get around with when I do use it as an ambulatory wheelchair user. Obviously, it's a little bit hard to navigate when I've got pets running around and I'm in the courtyard area. That's not my typical environment, but I wanted to show you how it kind of comes apart. I went with the scissor lock brakes as just a personal preference. I do like the way that they, do slow and stop compared to some of the other brakes, but again, just personal preference. I've had this chair, I think, for about 2 months now, maybe. Yeah, it turns, like the maneuverability, is that a word? It's great. Like, I think a lot of that is because of how lightweight the chair is, but it is just really easy. Like, it's got a great turning circle, which is why I ended up choosing that over some of the other chairs that I did trial. It has a single foot plate, which I prefer to having like just two separate feet. And when it comes to the disassembly of the chair itself, obviously you need to have the brakes off to take off the wheels, but I typically have them on until I get to that point. It is a J Basics cushion, I do believe, which is comfy. There are obviously many different types of cushions that you can get, but I just went with the easier, cheaper option, I suppose, like most cost effective. I've got side plates there, so obviously, you know, I'm not getting my hands caught in the wheels or anything like that, and just for comfort. I do typically have the anti-tippers on. I just didn't have them on when I was wheeling this down the stairs to film the video. The wheels themselves, it's just a push release, so they obviously do lock in place when they go back in, but it is really simple to disassemble it. Again, like, you can't take it off when the brakes are on, so you take the brakes off, and yeah, just a push release on that one there. The chair itself, I know the frame looks a little bit like, oh, how's this going to fit in a car? The back of it does fold down. So I know that obviously the foldable wheelchairs are a lot more compact, I suppose, for travel, but the benefit of this specific chair is that the back does fold down to make it more compact. You can fit it in the boot of most cars, and sometimes in the back seat as an alternative. And assembly, really easy, like to just put it back together. Obviously it is a little bit more time consuming than the foldable wheelchairs, especially if you are someone that goes out a lot. But again, I prefer rigid, like the rigid frame ones, because it's a lot lighter, because there isn't that cross section underneath for it to fold up. But as you can see here, the anti-tippers, they just click in, so there's two little nodule things, so you can choose where you want to kind of slide it, and obviously the anti-tippers are there so you kind of don't fall on your ass when maneuvering slopes, and just in general, because you do have to be more mindful of your center of gravity, at least I found, in rigid frame chairs, like when I trialed a couple of them out compared to the folding ones the folding one that I had, and also different ones that I tried out. This is the way that the cushion goes, obviously, because you can see the leg grooves there. I also wanted to show the power assist device that I got for my chair, so not from the same brand. I purchased this separately and later after receiving the chair. But it's called a Smart Power Assist Quick Manual to Electric Drive with Keypad, which sounds like some sort of Wish ad, but you can see on the underside of the chair, or where that bar is, the one that connects the wheels, there is an attachment that I've clipped on, which came with the power assist device itself. So that just makes it so you can clip the wheel on and off, not super easily, just because it is quite heavy. But the benefit is that I don't need to have two chairs, so I don't need to have an electric chair and a manual chair. And once the power assist wheel is secure, I then attach it to the keypad. As you can see, I don't have armrests on the chair, which was just how I chose to have it configured, but I easily can just clip it onto the front right hand leg of the chair. It doesn't obstruct the use of it when I am using it in manual mode, or you can see as well when it comes to after like clipping it into the prongs and screwing it in the back to make sure that is also secure. There are multiple settings on the chair. The first one is just your standard manual, but apparently it does adjust to the speed that you are self-propelling at. I haven't really tried it out, so I can't say for sure how well that works. And then there are the three speed settings, which is low, medium, and high. You can see the emergency button there as well, which you need to actually pull that one out initially for the speed settings to work, like to come into effect. So you turn the little dial for the speed, and then you lift that up, and then it'll start propelling itself. And then obviously to stop it, you press down the emergency stop button. I don't think that I recorded all three speeds, but I do believe that was the low and the medium. But as you can see, it's still quite fast. I hope that gave a little bit of an insight on my experience as someone with POTS and fibro, and what yeah, what my chair is like. If you have any questions, because I want to be more open about my experience with those two things, but there is a lot of stigma around invisible disabilities, and I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable to discuss that in some way, shape, or form. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comments down below, and I will look through them and maybe make a video discussing them. Otherwise, yeah, keep swimming, little axolotls, and always remember to be authentic, be accountable, and be inclusive. And we will see you for the next video. Bye.